like to introduce Indran Yakam.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to very moved by the music, inspired by this pandemic and by the poetry we've heard so far. And but I've actually got my own sort of pandemic poems, and I'm not yet out in a book. I'm working on that. It's actually being considered next week by the editors of a press. But I'm going to read. I mean, the pandemic is a sort of metaphor for tragedies. What we've lived through. But poetry is not only about tragedy. It's also about farce. It's also about laughter. Anyway, I'll read first a poem called Words and Orchids from a book, The Splintered Face, which I wrote after the tsunami of 2004, Boxing Day, December 26th. And the book is a series of, I think, 56 poems divided into 4 parts on that tsunami, and mostly as it affected Sri Lanka. Words and Orchids. We had gone for a sea bath and had just sat down to eat mangoes and pittu, a spicy pole sambal. My husband was thrilled with home food and sea air, the orchids the waiter arranged elaborately on our table. I wanted the flowers moved because they blocked my view of the sea, but my husband insisted. He said the waiter had taken such trouble, and in the States, how often would we eat mangoes by an ocean framed with orchids? Those were his last words. When the first wave rolled over us, I held on to a palm tree. Then as the water receded, ran uphill. I met our friends there, but my husband stayed behind. I do not have his body, just these words about flowers, his grin as he sucked mangoes with his hands. About 9 or 10 days after the tsunami hit, we were all looking for news, family, friends, where they were, and then this poem occurred to me. And when I wrote this poem, I realized I had to sort of write a whole series. Read this and then read a few other poems. Face. Imagine half your face rubbed out, yet you're suited up and walking to the office. How will your mates greet you with heavy hearts, flowers, rosary beads? How shall we greet the orphan boy, the husband whose hands slipped, children and wife swept away? How to greet our New Years and our birthdays? Shall we always light a candle? Do we remember the time erases the shore, grass grows, pains modified? Hetikadua in 1980, I wrote a ditty, a sailor's song, about rain in sunny Ceylon. I don't know what Calypsonians would compose about this monstrous wave, this blind hatchet man. Don't know, the Baila singers reply. We are a happy and go people, yet the fisherman's wife knows her grandfather was eaten by the ocean. Fisher communities have suffered in time, and what's happened now is just another feast for that bloody, sleeping mother lapping at our island. But what if the ocean were innocent? The tectonic plates innocent? What if God were innocent? I do not know how to walk upon the beach, how to lift corpse after corpse until I am exhausted, how to stop the tears when half my face has been rubbed out beyond the railroad tracks, and this anesthetic, this calypso come to the last verse. What shall we write in the sand? Where are gravestones incinerated? Whose ashes are these urned and floating through a house throttled by water? Shall we build a memorial some calculated distance from the sea, in a park, in the shape of a giant wave, where we can write the names of the dead? Has the wave lost its beauty, considered now obscene? Yet tomorrow we must go to the ocean and refresh ourselves in the sea breeze, down in Hikadua, where it is raining in sunny Ceylon. Tomorrow we must renew our vows at sunrise, at sunset. Let us say the next time the ocean recedes and parrots gawk and flee and restless dogs insist their humans wake up, we will not peer at the revelation of the ocean bed, nor seek photographs. We will run to higher ground and gather there with our children, our cats, our dogs, our pigs, with what we've carried in our hands, albums, letters. We will make a circle, kneel, sit, stand in no particular direction and pray and be silent and open our lungs and shout thanks to our gods, thanks to our dogs. You remember that line at the end of the wasteland where the dog that digs up the garden in the back, you know? I was thinking of that line, but God and dog, the play on that. Now, a poem from the Migrant States, which, you know, when I started writing poetry, publishing poetry, I was very lucky to get a comment from A.K. Ramanujan, who you may know as a wonderful poet and translator. And he said, "Welcome to the poetry of migration." This phrase stuck with me. Somehow I belong to the poetry of migration, and so I work that territory. And then, so I'll read a poem, a very brief, two shorter poems from this. And then, this one's called A Song Today, just 6 lines. I hear you singing, I know your song. You waded into a dinghy, jumped into a rowboat. You climbed aboard the freighter. You carry a cell phone and a picture, a name and a number written in the phone. You will call on arrival. You will cross desert. You will bypass the wall. You will pray to God. You will not turn back. The song today. Remember that wall that was being built around the United States of America? And it's still there in different ways. Now, another poem from the Migrant States. I promise you my pandemic poems in some future reading. Because I don't know why, maybe it's a sort of superstition on mine, because the book has not yet been accepted. I want to hold on for the premiere. So the Migrant States. My son Anand and my daughter Lola both inspired poems in this book. One, so I'll just read these two, and then I'll read one translation, and I think that'll be my time. Summer Chess for Anand. You go now, and I'm sad, and the sadness will spill into late summer and autumn until we meet again when the leaves fall and chestnuts smack our memories alive. And you ask, Dad, did you always walk in Regent's Park when leaves turned red and yellow and the morning bristled and the sun seared yet left your skin cold? A cold sun, Dad, I feel it too. This summer that I thought would go slow has turned now into a sprinter's dash. And what's to do? Yes, write and fill days with friends and games and sums until next summer, until the next time we go to bed and know there's no morning flight and your queen and rook are ready to trap my king. And then morning mass Halloween for Lola. It was written after, well, I can tell you the details of later. Morning mass Halloween for Lola. Hushed tones, place of worship, early morning. A woman kneeling in the pew could not get up. The priest brought her communion. Then another parishioner called for an ambulance. The fireman, a friend of the ambulance driver, arrived in his fire truck. They worked together, naturally. What to do now? Walk to the font, dip fingers in holy water, and go out to my car. Paramedics will lay her on a stretcher, pump her heart, wheel her away to the hospital. Life is coming to its end, a repeat. In my dad's case, his heart stopped while he kneeled at a pew. Nobody could revive it. He would have loved to see my daughter, smiling as she guards the witch's cauldron this Halloween, sweets in hand. And now I'll read a poem from Origami, selected poems of Manuel Ulacia. Manuel Ulacia is a dear friend of mine when I lived in Mexico City between 1999 and 2001. I'm still attached to the State Department, Foreign Service Officer, so I was working in Mexico at the embassy in Paseo de la Reforma. And he came by and he took me to lunch in the Zona Rosa nearby. And we became fast friends. And he was the grandson of Manolo Altolaguirre, one of the great poets of the generation of 27, Garcia Lorca and Vicente Alexandre, all those poets. And so they were Spanish sort of exiles from the Spanish Civil War. I mention this because I'm thinking about Lorca a lot at the moment, because I'm teaching a course on Lorca at Politics and Prose. And of course Lorca was a great famous, sad victim of that war, no? Killed in the first days of the Spanish Civil War. Anyway, here's a poem of Manuel's that I'll just read the English. I call it, he called it Arabian Night, spelled with K-N-I-G-H-T. Mountains, olive trees, vegetable fields in the valley, the high ochre walls of the royal palace in the old city, the night breeze, the muezzin's voice far away, monotonous, the usual cafe and its parishioners. Sitting on the terrace of the garden of El Habul and Meknes, a dark youth wearing a white jalaba, after a long while, after drinking the mint tea he had ordered, approached you to learn from where you came. And while he told you the history of that place, he peeled a ripe fig with a knife he drew suddenly. The reflection of the street lamp on the blade touched your face. 3 drops of milk spilled on his fingers. When he noticed your gaze, his pupils dilated like a tiger's. Then he divided the fig, a flowering filled with seeds that seemed to burn in the vault of the night. And immediately he put one half in your mouth and the other with an agile flick in his own. What pleasure in tasting the fruit, what vertigo on the edge of the hour. Blood thickened, the senses opened up to another time. Suddenly you felt his slipper touch your foot, and without a word you went with him through the streets of the old city. Thank you so much. Thank you.